If you were to take a wild guess, how many car models would you say have been built since the dawn of automobile innovation? 1,000? Hundreds of thousands? Not up to that? Whatever your answer is, you will agree that the world has seen numerous car models come and go, with a few of them remaining in our minds as memories and our garages as collector's items. These few models have different things going for them. Some of them were popular for their sleek design and styling, some for their speed and engine power, and some for their interesting approach to engineering solutions. This story is about one of such car models. It is a story about a car that fits perfectly into two different parts of Europe at the same time. It came from Germany but felt Italian, a car that confused even the ardent VW fanboys when it burst onto the scene. It looked like the MK2 Golf but was supposed to succeed the Scirocco, a car that finally cemented Volkswagen's desire to build a sports car. It started in VW's factory and didn't end up in the hands of its frenemy, Porsche. This is the story of a car that reinvented how sports coupes looked in an era when sports coupes looked like identical children of the same mother. The tale of a sports car that gave the Japanese a run for their money in an era when the world thought them unbeatable. The history of a car that showed that performance could come in small packages in an era when performance was attributed to big cars. This is the story of the Volkswagen Corrado. It was the 70s, and Volkswagen had caught the sports car fever. Yeah, it was a fever because at the time, the dream of all car companies was to build a sports car. See, sports cars were the in thing at the time, and every car maker simply wanted to have one, including Volkswagen. But for some reason, the plan just never materialized from the German company. The first attempt at building Volkswagen's first sports car failed because the company's chairman died during the process, and his replacement wanted nothing to do with sports cars. Yeah, he did not catch the sports car fever, so the plan was sold to Porsche, one of Volkswagen's subsidiaries, and that plan became the Porsche 914. The second attempt also failed, and wait for it, because of a last-minute change in management. And as before, the plan was sold to Porsche, and this became the Porsche 924. At this point, it felt like Porsche would make a series of VW's failed sports car projects. Well, the third time, they say, is the charm, and the engineers at Volkswagen decided to give the sports car thing a try again. However, this time, they did not go through the route of building the sports car from scratch. Instead, they decided to go the smart way, which is another term for going the lazy way depending on who you ask. For instance, copying your friend's essay while putting your creative spin into it may seem smart to you and your friends, but your parents and teachers would definitely call it lazy, so you get the point. For their smart or lazy approach, VW engineers decided to adopt the same method they used for turning the Beetle into the Carmen Ghia, which is to put a sexy Italian steel sheet and body on a utilitarian car and engine. They did this with the MK2 Golf, and the approach gave rise to the Volkswagen Scirocco. The Scirocco was a hell of a performer, and the Italian design inspired by Giorgetto Giugiaro gave it all the style and suave that the Golf did not have. So speed and performance met style and poshness, and the Scirocco met sales and popularity. Finally, all the failed attempts at building a sports car finally paid off, and Porsche can then learn how to build its own 900 series. Now, as with most car companies, once a car meets market success, the management and engineers start rolling out plans for its second generation. The same happened with Scirocco, except that instead of trying to make the second generation a bit better than the first, they made the car heavier and gave it a less attractive body, which means it lost some of its popularity. Notwithstanding the poor reception, VW decided to launch a new powertrain that its engineers had been working on with this second-generation Scirocco. Thus, the Scirocco then became a 16-valve Scirocco and created a sports coupe to be reckoned with. At least that's what car review magazines at the time said. Bouncing off the hype of this experiment, the company decided to do the same thing with the third generation of the Scirocco, but there is a teensy little problem. Trying the same thing with the third generation of the Scirocco would make the car expensive. Too expensive to be a replacement for the MK2 Scirocco because the Scirocco was already expensive by itself. So the genius idea came up. The company decided to keep producing the MK2 Scirocco, and the supposed third generation will be made into an entirely new car with a new name and, of course, a higher price point. At least that's better than selling the plan off to Porsche again. Now, with this plan, another problem came up. Yeah, too many problems, right? This time, it's a less serious problem: the name of the new car. You see, VW at the time had a thing for naming its cars after winds and storms. The Golf was named after the Gulfstream winds, the Jetta was named after the Jetstream winds, the Polo was named after the polar winds, and even Passat and Scirocco were both names of winds. So, in keeping with the spirit of this naming convention, someone suggested the name Typhoon, which is pronounced and is also the German term for the word typhoon. Quite on brand, right? Well, not really. Unlike winds, a typhoon is not that cool and is usually destructive. The last thing anybody wants is a name that reminds them of the destruction made by a typhoon. What's more, General Motors already had the name trademarked for one of its vehicles. So Volkswagen had to break wind or convention with the naming of this car and go with the name Corrado, which is actually a made-up name but sounds very close to the Spanish word for the verb to run. And thus, the Volkswagen Corrado was born in 1988. Now, with the meaning of its name and the idea that it was supposed to replace the legendary Scirocco, one would expect top-rated performance from this sports car. Well, no disappointment there, because the Corrado did just that. It bears mentioning that during its development, many of its internal components were taken from the Golf GTI, and as a result, the Corrado got praised for most of the things that the Golf GTI was known for. So great steering? Check. Nimble handling? Check. Packaging and utter usability? Double check. Hell, in a world where passenger seat and trunk space are not considered important in sports coupes, the Corrado offered enough legroom and cargo space for drivers. Most importantly, the car featured an active rear spoiler that is electronically deployed, with the simple function of reducing rear aerodynamic lift by 64%. Because this feature is very common today, you may not understand the cultural impact it had when it debuted with the Corrado in 1988. It was phenomenal and caused quite a lot of stir. Now, let's talk about its engine. For the Corrado's debut year, the Volkswagen engineers fitted it with a G60 engine. This engine was the popular 1.8-liter 8-valve 4-cylinder engine that powered most Volkswagen cars, but this time it was fortified with a boost from a positive displacement supercharger that VW recently developed, which gave the model its name, Corrado G60. The supercharger was shaped like the letter G, and its displacer depth was around 60 centimeters, hence the name G60. This engine did not only give the first-generation Corrado its name, but it also gave it about 158 horsepower and allowed the car to go from 0 to 60 in 8.9 seconds. Not too bad, you say? Well, it is disappointing for a sports coupe that is supposed to succeed a Scirocco that could do 0 to 60 in 7.7 seconds. So it became apparent that the Corrado needed a new engine, one that would do justice to the hype and rave that preceded its launch and also make it a worthy successor to the Scirocco. This realization birthed the VR6 Corrado in 1992. VR stands for Ryan motor, which translates to V-inline, describing both V and inline cylinder layouts. That is, of course, contradictory. The unit is actually a very narrow-angle V6, displacing 2,861 cc, with two offset banks of cylinders at 15 degrees to one another. Unlike a conventional V6, but exactly like an inline 6, there's just one cylinder head. The result is a 6-cylinder engine that's both much narrower than a typical V6 and shorter than a straight 6. In fact, it's more comparable in size to a 4-cylinder than a 6, which meant it could easily slot into a Golf floor pan. A creative and borderline ingenious engineering solution. As you can deduce, the story of how the VR6 came about is a load of technical gibberish that will bore the living daylight out of you, so we will save you the details. All you need to know is that the idea for the engine came from an engine layout pioneered as far back as 1922 by Lancia and featured a few tweaks on the V6 engine. By the time these tweaks were done, the Corrado had got an engine that gave it 178 horsepower, up to 190 for European drivers, and removed a whopping 2 seconds from the acceleration duration, allowing a 0 to 60 in 6.4 seconds. Now that's more like it. With this speed, the VR6 Corrado rose to the top of the Super Sports Coupe class, beating the turbocharged all-wheel drive Eagle Talon and Mitsubishi Eclipse at the time. Crazy, right? But this car was not only popular for its speed, the engine noises were something to look forward to. According to many car review magazines at the time, the engine noises made by the VR6 vehicle can be likened to music made from the depths and heights of a symphony orchestra, with a feel for pops. Some even said it felt like Mozart wrote music for the exhaust pipes. In simpler terms, the engine sounded so good they could not refer to it as noise. The hype and popularity that the Corrado now enjoys today can be attributed to the VR6 engine and its performance. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and so did the Corrado. The production of the Corrado came to a halt in 1995, and it left a void in the hearts of car enthusiasts. However, the legacy of the Corrado lives on, and it remains a beloved car to this day. So, there you have it, folks, the story of the Volkswagen Corrado and how it came to be from the Scirocco. The Corrado was a car that was ahead of its time, and it left an everlasting impact on the automotive industry. We wonder if Volkswagen will ever build something that interesting and revolutionary again.